This is not merely a building. It's a sanctuary of remembrance, a threshold where the veil parts, and minds once lulled to sleep begin to rise. This is the house of reawakening minds.
I entered in silence, intellect and despair, seeking refuge from illusions thick in the air. Walls lined with scrolls, lectures dense with light, where knowledge resurrects what was hidden from sight. No pulpit performance, no charismatic show, just a word in its purity, allowing the soul to grow. History unpacked with surgical precision, exposing falsehood, restoring vision. They taught me jurisdiction, the power of a name, how to stand in one's truth, free from legal games, from colonial codes to Moorish descent. I learned that ignorance is the true imprisonment. Not just a church, this is consciousness refined. I found myself inside the house of.
This is sacred ground, not just wood and stone. A haven for the seekers who once felt alone. Here the veil is lifted, the contract unwinds. In the house of reawakening minds. Truth is the altar, wisdom is the flame. Every soul remembered, every bloodline reclaimed. Time collapses and the spirit aligns. Inside the house of reawakening
We
minds.
speak of capitis, diminution, and trust law with grace, pulling veils from the statutes that distort the race. Reverend Doctor don't preach, she teaches through metaphysical keys and universal speeches. From Egypt to Amexim, maps are redrawn, and the minds of the lost are profoundly reborn. They decode etymology, undo the brands, expose how black was a corporate sleight of hand. This is reclamation through language and tone, where status is corrected and sovereigns are grown. From natural law to the astrological signs, the cosmos converge in these sacred confines. This ain't dogma, it's the science of the divine. Every lecture a seed in the garden of the mind.
You said know thyself but gave no guide, until I found the house where illusions died. Here the soul remembers, the contract is clear. We are the heirs and the ancestors cheer. This is sacred ground, not just wood and stone. A haven for the seekers who once felt alone. Here the veil is lifted, the contract unwinds. In the house of reawakening minds. Truth is the altar, wisdom is the flame. Every soul remembered, every bloodline reclaimed. Time collapses and the spirit aligns. Inside the house of reawakening.
They don't ask you to believe.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. We apologize for the delay, but happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. As you know, House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and of course, Moorish science. An awakening experience, we hope, for all ages. And tonight, Grand Sheik will present Reclaimation of Statehood. Now, while I may not be as vocal as usual during tonight's broadcast, I will chime in from time to time when I have something to say, Grand Sheik. It's going to be like it was a few years ago, when I used to be on the other side of the camera, adding my 2 cents here and there. Only you all will see me here tonight. With that, I yield the floor, Grand Sheik.
Yes, as we conversed many times, and the issue of statehood, comes up logically, because, and particularly with the issues that are occurring around the world that the nations are dealing with international trade, that has much to do with the breaking of the bond system, not just with the corruption that's been happening at North America, but because the nations stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds, which were set up in around 1862 on the backs of the Aboriginal people here. Now, by the what they refer to the period of Reconstruction, they were reconstructing history in order to mentally disconnect us from the land because we were under occupation. And this has much to do with why very often when we're going over these things, we'll go over, we'll mention, as an example, when Barack Obama, when he was acting as CEO for the corporation, and he mentioned the oldest running treaty and let know, part of history, which is well known, but not operatively public in school. When he said the oldest running treaty was treaty with Kingdom of Morocco, with not Kingdom of Morocco, Moroccan Empire.
Mhm.
All right. And so you got to know the kingdom and the empire. So the kingdom is a province of the empire, but the empire is actually North America under occupation. And this is one of the reasons why, even when he made that speech, he had the Moroccan flag in the background, which is the American flag, And America or American is simply a dialectical variation of al, which means descendant, Moroccan. And then he mentioned that the American Constitution logically come from Muslim law, but that's in reference to the Moors. And of course, when you go into that history and the international trade, and you see the Unum Sanctum operations, this is why it's very important for people who know, they read about the period of Reconstruction, but information is not given in a cohesive form of what that Reconstruction was and is. And this is why, although, like say, in a general conversation is not exposed, this is one of the reasons why we'll direct people to the Whittemore Convention in Philadelphia, because then when you start looking at the minutes, the operations, Harris Greeley, what they refer to as their oldest newspaper, which is called the New York Times, which is referred to around the world with most people as the New York Crimes, because they call that even to today, because of the corruption that was created by the reconstructing of history, even with the connection with the original order operating here, which included Canada, which was later. That's as a matter of fact, that's a historical lesson in itself, because most people today, because of the reconstructed history, don't know that Canada is by political technicality not even a country. It's a series of provinces that are still connected to the Circle Church and Chancery, the British Crown, and thus to the United States. But they, for public reasons, they won't publish that. But if you notice that every time they do any what you call legislation here at North America, it immediately affects Canada. And some people who don't understand the politics recognize that political aberration, but never examine, because they're taught or they assume that Canada is considered basically, for most political purposes, a country, when it's not really. It's a series of actually provinces that are cooperating with the United States, because early when they took over the Republic, etc., it was actually part of that same operation. But yeah, for infighting and for efficiency of appropriating the land, they projected a political separation for public view. And that's why when you examine, when you deal with the geopolitics and you start dealing with problems, or what they would call local problems that they have in Canada, this is why you see, like Alberta and the different territories, they actually act separately. And people don't understand that, because they're not an organized state the way it operates here. And the other interesting thing is important to recognize, and because these things were actually addressed, but for the sake of comprehension, particularly because many people are becoming what you call politically conscious here at North America, and this has more to do with the awakening youth. You know, because as you already know, more and more in, you know, just like you will see trends happening with the people, you see more of the youth now recognizing that they're indigenous to the land. However, they're not being taught about the geopolitics of their indigenous status, if you get the point.
Right.
And so, because of the political threat that serves to the occupying Europeans, that threatens their control system, and so logically, it's being disparaged or misrepresented the same way, because they know eventually that these are really the heirs. Now, by them not knowing about the Whigmore Party, Philadelphia, the real reason why the Mummers Parade is there, the reason why Philadelphia is one of the 7 cities in the Book of Revelation, the reason why the Ethiopian original Bible is not distributed, particularly among Aboriginal people on this side. That's why those books are missing. And then also, this is why when they refer to the bloodline of Yeshua, or what they'll say in the reconstruction, the bloodline of Jesus, that's why they will not emphasize, although it's mentioned, that you'll never see them put emphasis on it, of his grandmother, Ruth the Moabitess. You know, so that's the only inference that they left. Although in some books they try to remove that or muddy it, because the same bloodline is the same people of Ibri, and Ibri is really an action of the ancient Moabites when they were given, or what they would say sometimes, driven out of land, and they come to the new land, etc., or to the most extreme west, that's the Maghreb. And logically, this is why when you see even anthropologists, even recently, when they were doing DNA samples, etc., they discover that the closest DNA tie to the ancient pharaohs of Sudan and Kemet, etc., are directly related, closest to the Asiatics of America. You know, but they'll reconstruct it and say Afro-Americans, or, you know, or Phoenicians, right? But they won't when they're dispensing that history, they won't say Phoenicians. They'll just say blacks or Negroes and stuff like that, because that's part of the reconstructed history. This is again why it's important also from a political perspective, when people start studying the history here, and they look at, as an example, the Arthur St. Clair administration.
What's that?
Arthur St. Clair administration is when the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was drafted. That's why they don't teach. Now that's reconstructed, right? So, or like, just like if I mention Arthur St. Clair right now to you, right? And to most people,
Never heard of him.
They're not familiar because it's not generally taught in history. So that supersedes, or he was presented as a praetor before George Washington. So that's when the treaties was adopted, you see. So what they'll do, they'll cut that part of the history out as far as teaching is concerned. Although all the list of them, boo not in all of them, is all listed in the congressional record, but not in school books. So this is why most people are not aware that, you know, George Washington was the 9th president. And also, that's one of the things that also got Prince in trouble, because in an interview, he mentioned that. And then, of course, you already know who actually controls and owns the music industry. It's people who have been pretending to be us. This is also why people who really begin to know the history, if they're looking at bloodline pedigree, right? People who don't know that Ibri is an action, think that Ibri is the identity of the people here. And so Ibri is referred to in reconstructed history as Hebrew. This is why you'll see them, when they get a little bit of that history, they'll say, oh, we're the real Hebrews. That's right, but not correct. You know, it's not like, it's not unlike saying, Naila, say, parked in front of the house. We're the real park people. It's like saying that. In other words, because Ibri means those who cross the river, or those went before the Atlantic. This was before the Atlantic Ocean, before you had what is known in geological history as they call it the continental shift or split, drift. Well, in the ancient history, it's called the cocoa plate shift, right? Now, so the Almoroccans were on this as a political jurisdiction, right? We're on this portion of the most extreme west of the ancient Moabites. That's why it's called the Maghreb. That's why even today, if you look in any of your older dictionaries, I'll tell you the Maghreb means Morocco, the most extreme west, not west, the most extreme west. Then when you do the latitude, longitude, you'll see that the most extreme west, its terminal line is marked by Statue of Liberty. So when people be talking about the East, Far East, right? So it's both the most extreme west, and on the other side of it is the Far East.
Okay.
You see, but this is again why the ancient history is not really taught. And also by people who, unless they're in your higher degrees of secret societies, their mentality is always geological or geographical. Oh, Africa's only over there, i.e. Egypt is only over there. But yet when you go into your standard conversational records of your manuscripts and newspapers in the 1800s, it was common language referring to, Kentucky, southern area, and Tennessee areas, Egypt. But due to Reconstruction, and this is also why, like for people who knew the history, they know why. Like when you look at Louisiana Territory, right? When they talk about the Louisiana Territory transfer from the Franciscan Brotherhood to the Circle Church and Chancery for the United States in that so-called sale, right? You'll see the crescent and the star is put upside down. And even today, that's used symbolically of that area. You see the crescent and the star, and you see it upside down. That deals with the whole Louisiana Territory, and that goes from the Gulf into the base of Canaan land, or what you call Canada. And of course, even when you deal with court cases and you're dealing with Aboriginal claim, this is where you see in the court case where Empress Ghostin, where in court she made claim on that land, and of course it was acknowledged. But you already know for the public record, that's not promoted, but that's not known. That's not unknown. It's in the court records, because you bloodline, and of course, let me see. I think it was around 90, maybe 85, 86 in that area. That's when she put her eel on. She was in her court case. She's ghosting. We all talked and we used to go over history, and then she put her eel on. But and then another thing that to recognize, and what I had mentioned to you before, you know, because we talked about, you know, our good friend and sister, you know, who did her work and transformed, you know, Sister Zuriakis, right?
Mhm.
And of course, like I used to share with her, you know, Great Seal Papers at that time, you know, it was like between 1990, 91, from across the country was different active Moors and scholars who ran for the election in the Order of the Great Seal. Now, of course, the Order of the Great Seal in the Circle of Mothers and Sons, with its registration in Copyright Office, Washington D.C. Copyright Office. Those were the certificates for Circle of Life, Clocks of Destiny 1 and 2, right? And we used to meet on a regular basis in the land of Nod. And originally, because it was private meeting, actually in a trailer, you know, like one of those long 53-foot trailers. Mm-hmm. And people would come from mostly from the East Coast and from the East Moors operations. So East Moors tribes, mostly from Powhatan, different tribes. That's the land of Florida, land of flowers. They come up. People will come up from land of Nod, from the north, from Canada, and you had different Shakuns and Sheiks, because Shakun and Sheiks, same thing, just dialectical difference, would meet in there. And the certificates, in other words, to have the information of the Order of the Great Seal and Circle of Life, Clocks of Destiny 1 and 2, it wasn't what you would call public information, right? Mm-hmm. And if you were not registered and had certification through the Copyright Office, you were not availed that information.
Why was it restricted?
Two things. That's 360 degrees masonry.
Oh, so
not like 33.
This is a depth.
It's adepts.
Okay.
All right. Now, in heavily guarded information, not secret, but secret by virtue of the difficulty getting it. Mm. Right now, one of the brothers that was a scholar and a writer, they used to come to Land of Nod to their meetings, and I think he was from the Honesty Confederation to the north, right? He had a little pamphlet book, Rudder and Sexton, right? And we used to have the meetings up there in the trailer, and logically, we used to come from Shakopee territory. Shakopee is Jersey, right? Shakamoxon is Philadelphia area. So the Siyara and master astrologer, lawgiver for this territory was Rashida Bey, which you were never. She was not only adept, but she was also a very astute librarian. And she had an extreme rare book collections. As a matter of fact, I remember one of the books on the Civil War that she had, that when I used to go over her house, and she cooked, and we'd talk and go over stuff. And she had many books that when I did research, there was like that one of the Civil War books was 3,600. There was a few that was 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. they weren't available to the average person, you know. And even if it was, the average person doesn't spend that kind of finance on books. But anyway, here's the point. The brother Bashar that who did the original Rudder and Sexton, when we were meeting up there, you know, we would all talking after doing research and sharing notes and stuff like that. And a meeting would be called to order. And Rami Eel was a mirror of the territory of the land of Nod. So I looked over, they asked me to look over his the Rudder and Sexton, right? Mm-hmm. And that was one of the structures, because that's in-depth research on tribal jurisdictions in the West Gate, you know, in the West. And so it's based on extended research on tribal government of the Moorish Empire in the Western Hemisphere. That's what the Rudder and Sexton is. So when I reviewed it, and I had about a week, and I came back with some notes that I attached to it, right? And he read the notes, and then they took it to committee, and they did some research. So when they came back, when we came back, had to meetings, etc., he requested, the brother requested that it was all right if he added the notes that I did to his book, right? And I said, I have more, but I just, you know, I just put those notes in there because I think it was, you know, helpful. And so he asked me to go ahead and put the other notes in it. And so it ended up being like that. That became the Rudder and Sexton. That's why most people think I wrote the Rudder and Sexton. Do. No, the majority of it I did. The majority of it. Yeah, but it was originally written by one of the adepts, scholars of the Order of the Great Seal. And just by me having it, and when he saw the notes that I made in the copy that I had, you know, when we were having, they called the meeting to order, he requested that he would take my notes, and they redid the Rudder. But when I redid it, I put the original notes that I had in it, and it really, it dwarfed everything he had, and I reconstructed what he had. And that's why most people think, again, like I said, that I did Rudder and Sexton, but I didn't. I reconstructed it and added to an existing book. And the scholar and the writer asked me to include it. But the ongoing communications that was taking place over about a year's period at Land of Nod, the Shiara and the Emir of the Order of the Great Seal of Land of Nod, and also I forget the brother's name, but anyway, was an adept from Cleveland, Ohio, from the Circle of Mothers and Sons of the Order of the Great Seal, sent notes to New York requesting that they put my name on the list for running for Emir, which was this election that they were having in the Land of Nod, because you had scholars from California, Canada, Texas area, different parts of the country. And I didn't want to, you know, I wasn't that interested in it, but everybody insisted. And so when they had the election, Rashida wrote me in, who just wrote my name in, and I got elected overwhelmingly. That's how I became the Emir of the Order of Great Seal. However, over the period of years, and you know, the experience of dealing with people from different parts of the country, and then some people come in from the UK, and in the UK, somebody came from Dominica, Ecuador, different people that, you know, that are Aboriginal people that were in what you call tribal governments, you know, that would come to that meeting, but it was exclusive meetings, you know, it wasn't like general public. And they also put a bid in, wanted me to be Emir. So I became Emir. But the other thing that bothered me over the years is looking at the problems with the people and recognizing that this information wasn't available to the masses, and that unless they were members of the Order of the Great Seal, then, and also they would have to be presented. In other words, you couldn't just get it. Someone would have to. Only one person could like vouch for you, like this. If someone vouched for you, and like logically being who you are and the way you think and the way you challenge, the way you think, the way you're willing to adjust and to look at things open-minded, somebody would probably approach you. You know what I mean? Not unlike they would do in you know, in your general orders and stuff like that.
Right.
And I saw so many problems, and at that time also, we most of our cars, because I had about 5 cars in. I had an Imperial, I had a Chrysler New Yorker, I had a 300, I had a Subaru, one of those little Subaru, and I had a Dodge Daytona, that little speedy car. All of our cars were sealed under the Great Seal, and we had Moorish tags. And my number was 777 on my tags, right? And I saw a couple of, I know on Wilmington Avenue and Newton Avenue in Camden, they stopped me in the Daytona. I had the Daytona, it was like a sports car, a real shift, you know, 7-speed, 6-speed, something like that. And they did the usual thing, you know, and took the car and all that stuff. So when I went to the venue, it came to City Hall, and I remember the magistrate, her name was Bell. You know, they called the judge, I'll refer to her as magistrate. And of course, papers come from the Great Seal. So they sent papers there from the Order of the Great Seal from both New York and Shakopee territory, right? So when I went up to in the venue, I wouldn't pass the bar, you know, the bench, right? When he called me up. And she said, well, what do you want us to do? I said, I want you to put that car right back where they got it, right there. Put it right back there on Newton Avenue, right where they took it. Right? And I said, I'll deal with the other stuff later. And she said, we're going in the hall and, you know, talk to the prosecutor. And so I went in the hall. Prosecutor was all nervous and stuff. He said, well, they made a mistake, and we weren't trying to create new problems, you know, all that stuff, right? Because they knew we could sue them. At the same time, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was more or less angry. So they, the next day, it wasn't the same day. They took my car, put it right back there. They drove to my house on Mickle Street and gave the car and apologized, the keys, right? Car and stuff, like apologized and said, this is mistaken, you know, we just make sure everything is safe and all that other stuff, you know, because it didn't have their registration and all that stuff, the tags and stuff like that.
So let me interject and ask you a question.
Sharing.
Why did they know that you could, what gave you all the jurisdiction?
It didn't really give it. It didn't give, see, this the whole deal.
I mean, let me finish.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
What did you all have going for you that allowed you to say, you know, we'll deal with that and we'll sue you, and they knew that they could be sued?
Yes.
How did they know that?
See, the Order of the Great Seal, all right, now, the certificates to the Clocks of Destiny, registered in the Library of Congress, is essentially state papers. Mm-hmm. You know, we're a state. The people are in general. Now, what I recognize is that this happened mainly because of the numbers, if you get the whole point. Mm-hmm. Meaning that it's, you know, hundreds of us with those degrees across the country, but that's small numbers. Mm-hmm. Right. And during that time, that's when I used to go to court a lot of times and beat cases for other different Moors that come in, and we go through all that. But the fact that you spend time to beat you know, to fight them. And then if you file suit, then the stuff goes on and on and on. Not unlike the suit that we did with Grand Sheik Nature Eel, that became very noticeable to a lot of scholars. A lot of scholars look at that case. And I recognize, you know, I looked at it from this perspective. Yes, I understand the copyright protections, one, and I recognize the principle of law behind it, and then the jurisdictional issues behind it. This is from even going through the case. That's where those cases came up that you see me put on a judicial notice. Those cases that's on a judicial notice, you know, we do the name correction, then you have the lawful notice. That's where them cases come from. That's what, you know, that blew that out. But I looked at that this was common in our community, where our people are always being targeted and stuff like that, you know, profiled and stuff like that. And people weren't supposed to have this information unless they're members of the Order of the Great Seal. And also part of the protocol, they would have to get all their degrees through the temples. And after that, meaning that you couldn't be a member of the Order of the Great Seal until you completed degrees in the temple, which means you needed that background too. But that's what you call like your collage, your basic collages of information, then you step up to Great Seal. My position was that this information, the right belonged to the people. Now, while the literature is copyright, the birthright belongs to the people at large. And this is one of the motivations as to why I started sharing the information with the Order of the Great Seal openly to the people, contrary to the protocols that many of the order people in the order, you know, maintained. If you get the point. Now, let me show you. Let me show you as an example. Let me see. Hold on. Hold on. See the copyright, 1947, Cleveland, Ohio. Now, Cleveland, Ohio, that's where the Order of the Circle of Mothers and Sons is. That was their main headquarters. And we used to fly out there sometimes to go to meetings. Now, this was revised in 51 to 73. And now, anybody with these degrees is 360. Now, you know, in your ordinary Masonic degrees, they go to 33. Now, also, when you look at people like in the Moorish Divine and National Movement, not necessarily Moorish-sized, but remember, the Moorish-sized temple is a corporate name for doing corporate business. But the private order is the Holy Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which is a civic organization. The Moorish-sized Temple of America is the added affidavit that was done under with Hoover for protection because of the infiltration, the same crap that was happening. And so I looked at that history too. And so that's when I started sharing the information. So basically, like you having this right now, this would not be in your possession.
It's the clock of destiny, y'all.
I'm just saying, yeah, neither of these would, and also the circle of life, none of this would be in your possession. So I exposed this to the general public. Logically, that made a lot of people angry at me. because remember, knowledge is power.
True.
And a lot of people and this is what I recognize, not unlike when I was an assistant minister in the Nation of Islam, and I, like, just like we eat it, and I come to your house, we eat at your table, like Muhammad Ali come to my house, and we eat at the table. Joe Tex, singer, captains, Sterling, different people with big names in the Nation of Islam, right? Now, and when I came in the Nation of Islam, I was like 18, 19, right? But I advanced so very quickly because when I looked at the information, it was like, please, this is, you know what I mean? So I was, within 6 months, I was assistant minister under Harrison, Temple number 10 in Camden, right? And immediately I was like exposed to a lot of celebrities. We go all around the country and stuff like that. And then of course, one thing that I experienced over and over again, and including when I came into the Order of the Great Seal, and the Order of the Great Seal I came into after I came into the Moorish Temple of Science. After I left the Nation of Islam, I came into the Moorish Temple of Science, and Grand Sheikah Daria Bey, pardon me, brought me in, right? Her whole family has been in the temple for generations, from like the early 20s, right? So, and I had the privilege of talking directly and meeting directly with Grand Sheikh Hamad Il in Newark, New Jersey, where the movement was founded, who maintained until he passed form Moorish Temple of Science, not Moorish Science Temple of America. We had went to a ball in Trenton, New Jersey. Grand Sheikh Walter Hill, Sheikas Daria Bey, and myself, right? And was a few other people. And so they took me to meet Hamad Il, was the last active sheikh that walked directly with Prophet Nabi Ali. He was the last living one that walked directly with Ali. And we had dinner there. We talked. They had meetings, and his office was in the back with a curtain for a door, a velvet fancy curtain for the door. We were leaving, and Sheikh Hamad Il stopped us. He called from the door and stopped us at the door, right? So Grand Sheikh Walter and Sheikas Daria, we stopped and we started going back. He said, no, hold on. He said, I want him, tell him to come here. So he pointed to me. So he said, I want to talk to you. So we went in the back in his office. He closed the curtain, and we talked about half an hour, just talked in general. And he went in his drawer and he pulled out old Quran, old questionnaire, not with the Moorish Science Temple, with the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, right? He signed them and gave them to me. He says, here, I know you're going to do something with this. Hope to see you soon, right? That's the first time I met him, last time I seen him. That's where I got them from. That's where I got my second, but the older original Qurans from. And you already know I'm going to tell. So that's why most of the people that came to the Great Seal Order, right, they had the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, and many people in the temple never saw that. They only saw Moorish Science Temple of America. They didn't see Moorish Holy Temple of Science. And the older ones. So I had the older one, and I had the older questionnaire, and it had more notes in it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yes. But those experiences, I've always kind of been a rebel anyway. So when I kind of see injustice or something like that, I'm just not the type to sit on it. That's why I started sharing that stuff. And then because I always wrote anyway, you know, I started sharing it and bringing people into the order. I would bring people into the Order of the Great Seal, but I would also share a lot of the information with people just in general. So that brought a lot of, so the Great Seal expanded to a heavy degree. Then I think it was around 94, 95, under the guise, black budget guise. I remember it very well. Youth Task Force. That's what it was called. And they did a program attacking all Moors cars and start harassing them and suppressing us. And that's after a while, you know, and then we always had to fight cases, and that's why we stopped running the tags, because we were spending so much time fighting them. Even though we were beating them, they were draining us that way. And of course, up in Asbury Park, New Jersey, where Grand Sheik Nature Hill, with his van, they had stopped him. So we beat them up. We beat them up in court. So we had to come down in Philadelphia and file suit at 6th Street at the federal building, because remember, whenever you're dealing with Secretary of State, because when you're dealing with nation states, Secretary of State, basically, so it's automatically what you call federal. State court don't deal with it. Mm-hmm. Although they may try to address it in state court technically don't have no jurisdiction. So they had about 6 or 7 lawyers for Newburgh and for Asbury Park, because there was cops on both of those districts that stopped him with the van. It went on for a while, and they filed a claim of what you call 12B6. I have to check the records, because we later published that in the paper too. And so what that was for the police department of both Newburgh and for Asbury Park is diversity of nationality, argument of diversity, and dismissed the case without prejudice. And then they towed the car back to his house and then tried to pay him off. And then they had a meeting in Asbury Park, Main Street, Asbury Park, and he called us all there. And with Nika too, his wife Nika, and many muftis in that area, and the captains of the police, and they cleared the office. As a matter of fact, they did this in Camden too, but they did it with this case. And the captain, you know, after they closed the door and they had a meeting, they cleared everybody out. And they said, "We know you're right, and we're trying not to let this stuff get out of hand." He said, "But the fraternal order has to carry out what they're instructed to do, or they lose their jobs. What we're going to do, we're going to put out a notice for them to stop, you know, harassing you, etc. Hopefully," and he said, "you know that if you sue, they're going to drag you, and they're going to drag it for years. We're just being honest. However, you know, we'll disappear this case." Right. So that's that case. And we put that in the news, in the Al-Moroccan Star newspaper too. Right. If I can find a copy, I may ask Dooley if he has a copy, because that case is in there too. And that'd be a good law breakdown for people. But the point that I'm making is this. Logically, that sparked my passion and my anger because I recognize it's issue of numbers and that our people don't know. So they're looking at us. We're what, thousands of Moors spread out all over. And here's our people being abused every day. And then looking at, you know, as you travel, knowing a lot of people. And then of course I know a lot of celebrities, some names I won't mention, you know, for the sake of their privacy, etc., who also knew this information. And many of them got eels and bays, but they don't use them publicly. I'm telling you factly, right? Because of the oppression. And then, of course, knowing the Whittemore operations at Philadelphia, it's not justified, but I understand you're dealing with what you call more serious political repercussion type thing, you know, and our protection is that we are not in the black codes. However, you know, they viewed us as a, you know, political threat.
Well, I don't, you know, really, I can't, you know, put it together as how
You know,
some of them knew and recognized or acknowledged your, like you said, that you were correct in, you know, declaring, you know, who you were and having your own tags and jurisdiction, while others
according to where, yeah,
would then persecute you.
Yeah, yes. Now, even after that, right? So, as an example, Rahm Emanuel is a wedding signature, right? Mailed this to us at the Great Seal, right? Now, this is, I would call it condescending in structure, incorrect, but around the corner acknowledgement, right? And also, this they brought this out of the house. They mailed this from Washington D.C. from, you know, hearing some of the case. So this is in the Legislative Journal. That's page 57, 59, Resolution 75. And within the documents, we have about maybe 21 or 22 different proclamations from all your major cities, Philadelphia, Chicago, all your major cities. And this as an example. And as you can see, it's condescending. And Rahm Emanuel has his wedding signature. And this is a copy of it, but this is his wedding signature. So instead of saying, you know, for the record, you know, that we're the real Americans, they'll act like we're, you know, we're citizens and therefore we, you know, we came from the plains of Morocco and we're citizens of this nation and blah, blah, good, you know, all this stuff. They even declared Moorish Week in a lot of territories. Then in one territory, they got a bunch of feedback with some Europeans. And then you see one of the mayors rescinded it, even though it was about 21 or 22 from around the country, different territories. So essentially, you know, just like from the House, from the Legislative Journal, right, Resolution 75. So Mr. Whitkin, so you can see this from the Speaker of the House. This is in the journals. So Mr. Whitkin, Mr. Speaker, I desire at this time to call it Resolution number 75, printers number 1034. The resolution was read by the clerk as follows: in the House of Representatives, April 17, 1933. Now this is right during it. So this is the time when Roosevelt was refinancing the United States Corporation Company, because after Drew Ali did the claim against the Queen of England in 1928. Yeah, 28. And of course, this also, they had that big meeting with the Order of American States in Havana, Georgia. I mean, Havana, Cuba, which is Isabella, right? So they issued this. So they went in bankrupt. They're going into bankruptcy. So now this is at the same period that Roosevelt then used the birth certificates to refinance the United States. So I'm just showing you timeline and the real politics that people don't understand in relationship to what's really going on and even understanding how much attention was paid to Noble Drali and different responses were made relative to he make a move, they make a move. He make, that type thing. So in the House of Representatives, April 17th, 1933, many sons and daughters of that proud and handsome race, which inspired the architecture of Northern Africa and carried into Spain the influence of the artistic temperaments, have become citizens of this nation. Now, I'm going to give you an issue on citizen a little later on too. In the city of Philadelphia, because that's where they took the birthright, there exists a Moorish American society made up of Moors who found here an end of their quest for a home and the children of those who journeyed from the plains of Morocco. The society has done much to bring about a thorough absorption of these people, of those principles which are necessary to make them good American citizens. The Moorish Americans have, since being here, missed the use of the titles and name annexations that were so familiar at home and which are used in accordance with the doctrines of the religious faith to which they are adherents. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives commends the Moorish American Society of Philadelphia for the efficient service it had rendered the nation in bringing about a speedy and thorough Americanization of those former Moors, and that in accordance with the fullest right of religious independence guaranteed every citizen, we recognize also the right of these people to use their name affixes, Il and Ali or Bey, or any other prefix or suffix to which they have heretofore been accustomed to use, or which they may hereafter require the right to use. On the question, will the House adopt the resolution? It was adopted May the 4th, 1933. Now, so the issue of anybody who not understanding that the Moorish nation is recognized state is because they don't read the records. Because they know that the parties in controversy in Americas is what? Occupying Europeans and the Aboriginal people. Now, also you want to look at
Well, before you get away from that, though, what you read sounds like
it's condescending.
I was very, not only is it condescending, it's it seems to be incorrect.
It is. That's what I said.
Right. So, I mean, you're saying that we're recognized, but that is not a factual
what I'm saying
statement in those resolutions.
Exactly. That's why I said it's condescending.
And
it's condescending and it's incorrect.
It's false. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's condescending.
So
all right. So this is another reason why, like when in around 80, around 1980 or something like that. No, it was 85 when I did Treaty Book, right? Mm-hmm. This is another reason why when I went to the Library of Congress and I went into George Washington's papers, because at that time, we didn't have internet and we used to travel. We used to take people down to the memorial every year with ordered roundtable, right? And so from George Washington's papers, and also in my library, I have a book on the diplomatic papers of the United States, which is also a rare book and it's not available to everyone. Expensive book too. But here, and this is another reason why I put that in the treaty book. And this also relates to the inferences that Obama was making, right? So now this makes connection, because remember now this is in 1789. So 1789, that's when he was appointed. But the treaty was set forth under the St. Clair administration, superseding George. But this is George's correspondence, right? So it's a letter from George Washington to Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Sultan of Morocco, where? City of New York, December 1789. Great and magnanimous friend, since the date of the letter which the late Congress, so he's talking about the late Congress because the Congress already exists before he comes, you see. So they're not going to teach that in regular school, because they teach in school that he was the first. And also he was what? A Mason, because all of them are. So in secret, he got a fez just like the rest of them, you know. So since the date of the letter, which the late Congress by their president, so he's telling you, President supersede him, addressed to your Imperial Majesty, the United States of America have thought proper to change their government and institute a new one. So they're changing the government, agreeable to the Constitution. So now they're coming in harmony with the Muslim law. That see, so you can see they're adopting this, of which I have the honor herewith to enclose a copy. The time necessarily employed in the arduous task and the disarrangements occasioned by so great though peaceable a revolution will apologize and account for your Majesty's not having received those regularly advised marks of attention from the United States, which the friendship and magnanimity of your conduct toward them afforded reason to expect. The United States having unanimously appointed me, see, he was appointed, to supreme executive authority in this nation, your Majesty's letter of August the 17th, 1788. So now you understand the ordinance. So now you got to know that history. They don't teach that either. Which by reason of the dissolution of the late government remain unanswered, has been delivered to me. I have also received a letter which your Imperial Majesty has been so kind as to write in favor of the United States to the Bashars of Tunis and Tripoli, and I present to you the sincere acknowledgments and thanks for the United States for their important marks of your friendship for them. We greatly regret the hostile disposition of those regencies toward this nation who have never injured them is not to be removed on terms of our power to comply with their subordinate. Within our territories, there are no mines, whether of gold or silver, and this young nation, just recovering from the waste and the dissolution of a long war, have not as yet had time to acquire riches by agriculture and commerce. But our soil is bountiful and our people industrious, and we have reason to flatter ourselves that we shall gradually become useful to our friends. The encouragement, this is very important, the encouragement which your Majesty has been pleased generously to give to our commerce with your dominions, Moorish dominions, the punctuality with which you have caused a treaty with us to be observed. Now you see why they don't teach treaty. And the just and generous measures taken in the case of Captain Proctor make a deep impression on the United States and confirm their respect for and attachment to your Imperial Majesty, your Moorish dominions. Now you understand what Obama was talking about? It gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity of assuring your Majesty that while I remain at the head of this nation, I shall not cease to promote every measure that may conduce to the friendship and harmony which so happily subsists between your empire and them, and shall esteem myself happy in every occasion of convincing your Majesty of the high sense which in common with the whole nation I entertain the magnanimity, wisdom, and benevolence of your Majesty. May the Almighty bless your Imperial Majesty, our great and magnanimous friend, with his constant guidance and protection. So they were under protection on our property. Now you understand the treaty. Now you understand the ordinance of 1787. Now you understand Article 6 in its entirety of the Constitution, etc., where all treaties, debts, contracts engaged into before the Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land. Now, then when you look at Drew Ali, when he made a claim and presented on the enforcement of the treaty and constitution to the Queen of England. Why? Because they were violating the treaty and constitution, because we're the people of the land. We're protected under ordinance of 1787, the treaty of 1786-87 revised one time, 1836, only revision has never changed, etc., etc. Then you begin to, when you do the research in the geopolitics, you understand the political problem that they were having here with the operations of the United States Corporation, depending on the Moorish resources, but at the same time suppressing Moors. Now you understand when you go into the journals, etc., and they were supposed to undo the operations that they did with the Whiggamore, you know, creating the black codes and adopting the black codes from Codes Noir of the Franciscan Brotherhood. They adopted the Christian black codes, and that's what they've been suppressing us under. Then also to expand on muddying the water, the War Department set up the Bureau of Indian Affairs to create schism with the different tribes so that people would not make claim. And this is what's has to do with Seneca, New York, the whole area that you call Harlem and stuff that's right now. And also even later, it has to do with the bombing in Tulsa, Oklahoma, also in Greenville, North Carolina. All of this stuff is related. All this stuff is related because they were killing the history and suppressing us. Now, they were internationally, they were supposed to decolonize. So when you go into the records, this is where you find the issues that were brought up with relative to the United States mainly, but with Western, what they refer to Occidental nations decolonizing. So they're around 1960, right? And you'll see that reference when you go into international court, when they're talking about decolonization. Then you see, of course, they reneged. Now, about 5 years before then, a little bit before then, about 7 or 8 years before then Dwight D. Eisenhower administration, and this is deal with United States law of a general and permanent character in force. This is the law, right? So the Eisenhower administration relinquished jurisdiction at Morocco, right? Now, logically, this is where Grand Sheiks and Sheikesses in the Moorish divine movement have their place. Then you understand Act 1. Their obligation to enforce law, right? Then you also see when they had the infiltration, then you see Drew Ali did the additional bylaws that's in the back of the questionnaire. You know, and then even when you look at the questionnaire where he says, why the European claim to be white, right? You're talking about, right? Because white is a status. It means what? God, means God and the ruler of the land. So they're taking our places. So now this has much to do with even the ritual of the Mummers Parade with the Whiggamore Party operation, Horace Greeley, 6th and Moore Street, where they gather ritually, and they would march what you call west, young men, go to Jupiter, just, you know, that correlates just above, instead of being 14th Street, you got 13th, then you got Jupiter, then you have 15th, then you have City Hall, which was a battleground. Then you have the Masonic Hall Lodge right there, and that's where George Washington and that same guard, they even have his tools still right there, in the Cherry Sedan, right there at that lodge, right there in Philadelphia, right where they took the birthright. Then they have the parapet.
What do you mean when you say they took the birthright?
That we're reconstructing the history. And then that's why when they have those tours and they take people down to Carpenter's Hall and they do that trek every year, that's what that's all about. And they take people down to Carpenter's Hall, Ben and all the rest of them, they show the tools and all that other stuff, right? Yeah. And then in Washington, D.C., in his the memorial they built for him with the Rose Stone that they got quarried from Connecticut. And you have Chief Justice Ben Bey's Fez in the glass case there. So Chief Justice Ben Bey, all people in Masonry know that that's who it is. Mu Ali, his name is Chief Justice Ben Bey Mu Ali. Then in history, he's written as Ben Banneker. Now that's for the masses. That's the Reconstruction. For those with the degrees, Chief Justice Ben Bey Mu Ali, known as one of the greatest swordsmen of the time. Now, and then rewritten in history, Benjamin Banneker, etc. So the Reconstruction, part of the Reconstruction is the Benjamin Banneker story, when as Chief Justice. Now, those past 33 degrees know that. All more Adams know that. And now, keep in mind, this is the real history here. But again, these different pieces like this are in relationship to what Adams know, but don't talk about. Although this is not what you call registered Great Seal. This is in the records, and this is just stuff I did, research on my own, but stuff I already knew any damn way. But you put it together, then you start seeing the motive of the geopolitics and the suppression. Then when you look in the War Department, so like when people look at the Southern Education Board and the maintenance of the old history prior to George with St. Clair and all that stuff, Boudinot, all them guys, right? All the other presidents before them. That's why they block that history out. And so they took the old Southern education order and blocked all that history out. Then the War Department funded John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, the same Gates family that's dealing today, same Gates family, and same Rockefellers that run the bank system, etc., set up the General Education Board 1902. And even when they do that march in Philadelphia, and they did that statue right at the mound where they built, where they have the art museum with the Egyptian architecture, and they used to hang in there. It was on wood, an oil painting of the Moorish chieftain.
This downstairs.
Yeah, that's original on wood. It's not on canvas, it's on wood. And they had a special room in there, special room to the side where people would come all around the world taking pictures of the Moorish chieftain, know that he ruled in this area, right? And when people start waking up to it, I forget the amount they had written it. I remember when I was helping prepare for the Million Woman March, because I helped did some of the logistical order and the security for the Million Woman March, and me and a few others, right? So to appease us, none of the buses had to pay for parking. That's under the order of the Great Seal. And a lot of people today don't know that. Dooley knows it, and a few other people know, but most people that participated, Pam and them heard about it or know about it because we used to meet there at the Justice Building right up there on 47, 48 Philly, right before that. But most people don't even know that the reason them buses didn't have to pay for parking is because of us and the Great Seal papers. So a lot of things are done in the background that people don't know, if you get the point. But all of this is placation, if you get the point. You know how they say pacifying, condescending, BS. But I also know that the information belongs to the people because it's their birthright. In spite of the fact that many people are pledged, not to talk, or you'll see people who know the information will, take comfortable jobs and play into the political cronyism with people having meetings and giving them plaques and making them important guys in the civil rights struggle, BS and everything. And all of them know this information because they do know it at 33, 32 degrees. Anyway, even though 33 is given to them honorably, you know, under honor, all of them have that after 18 degrees, you know. So, you know, when, you know, people pretend, you know, that that Africa is only on the other side, falsehood. When they think that Paris is only on the other side, falsehood. When they think that Memphis is only on the other side, falsehood. This is again why they don't show the exotic map. And so the exotic map is the real map of this territory before Reconstruction. That's why you'll see it. You'll see that map that they'll have, like as an example. Let me show you as an example. So this stuff, to the average person, doesn't know the relationship, but anybody in Masonic degrees knows this. So they just think this is just, you know, something that's interesting in top secret papers, but that it doesn't play a role in the political realm. Yes, it absolutely does. And so one of the things that I've always done is I try to take a vital pieces of information that bring people back to a level of consciousness to reconnect them to the land. That's why I started publishing this stuff. You know, but it made me unpopular with a lot of people who would like me to disappear, if you get the whole point. However, when people talk about whether these people know who we are or not, the very conversation, even in along those lines, is fraudulent. So the issue and basically what Drew Ali did, you know, to commanding that the Queen, you know, acknowledge their obligation to the treaties and to the ordinances, etc. And of course, that caused them to go bankrupt. Now you understand 33 operations, and then why they fractionalized the marriage certificate, desperately trying to maintain the order. And then you understand the assassination of Drew Ali, etc. So all of this stuff plays into even when you have some of this knowledge, and we only going through little pieces of it. Then you begin to understand certain statements that even Martin made, being a 33-degree Mason, when he began to recognize that he was going to be neutralized. But if you know the real history, when we say the non-reconstructed history, you will look at it differently because you know that the information is being suppressed because of the geopolitics. Because this is another reason, like when you see what Raleigh said, he says, half has not been told. If I told you everything, you all go back to sleep. And he also said, if you tell all the Moors or everything, they might tear something up. So you have to give it to them in degrees, etc. But this has much to do with when Martin said, you know, our people are refugees in their own land. So that's Masonic. I say method of dispensing that the people are home. You know, even this is also why, like when they did the Wizard of Oz, like in the original script, her slippers were actually silver. So when they did the movie, they changed them to red ruby slippers, when actually in the original script it was silver because they were dealing with the moon. All right. So when you're dealing with actually the North Gate, it's called the Temple. This area is called the Temple of the Moon and Sun. And so the Trinity of the cosmo operations of Egypt of the West, or is known as the Maghrib, is the sun, the moon, the sun, and Venus. So Venus, and that's where your star is. That's your star of man. That's that star right there. And so because we have fallen, this is why the Daughters of American Revolution and also Eastern Star will use that star and instead of in its upright, they'll put it inverted. That means the fallen, so we fall. And also, this is why your DAR manual or the issue on citizenship, the fundamental rules of citizenship and obligations, the DAR manual is done by the Daughters of the American Revolution. That's why you see the whole building, including the steps and the rails, are all marble, carved marble. And then when you go into the entry of the doorway, they'll have Dolly Madison's room. They'll have a chained off view in there. And you see Dolly, because she was a little woman, right? And you see her turban, Dolly Madison's. Everybody come around the world taking pictures. And then they'll have the brass plaque at the entries of the door with the United States with the small U, will not be capital. And then you have papers and stuff like that. And then, of course, down the street, then you go to the Congress records. And then you go to the memorial. And that's why George Washington's memorial is an obelisk on the Potomac. And also, Nippon give them the cherry trees. Now, the cherry tree is the nickname of that flag. That's the cherry tree. When they say, indeed, George Washington chopped down his uncle's cherry tree. It's a cherry tree. It's allegorical. But point made that I'm saying, even with a little bit that we discuss, people who have any of the degrees and people in any scholarship, a little bit of information leads you to this. Meaning that you wouldn't even have, meaning that with a little bit of information, just scholar stuff, meaning that somebody that has just doing journalism would immediately see Noble Drawley totally different than how he's presented, but also recognize the politics and a lot of the misrepresentation, just like you recognize, once you have certain knowledge, you can pick through instrument, just like you recognize the condescending and the twisted falsehood in the proclamations. And you got about 21 of them from different territories from around the country. But then when you go into the diplomatic papers of the United States and into the congressional records and into the period of the Continental Congress, etc., including when you go to Carpenter's Hall, then you go into them records and you see blank pages missing, taken out of that same period. But meaning that knowing the geopolitics, the motive. Somebody who don't know the motive will just say, well, how come these pages are blank here? 1774. 1770. Then when you start going in Washington, you go into the archives or you go into microfilm, then you start going into those operations of the ordnance. You get indications of Boudinot, Arthur St. Clair. Then you go into the formulations of the treaty. Then you go into the Honesty Confederation of they'll say in history, the Iroquois Indian tribes delivered to the United States the Constitution, the foundation for the Constitution. That's why they'll say the Indians gave the United. No, that's the Honesty Confederation. That's the confederation that's mentioned in Article 6.
I wanted to. I was listening to you, and
but go ahead.
The title of this particular class is Reclaiming Statehood. So, and you know how you get when you get into a history thing, you on a roll. But I want to bring us back to the title just for a few, just because we don't have a lot of time left. And so I did a search on that about defining statehood, as it pertains to us. So may I share?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So the civic definition, statehood as nation states. It says in Moorish American jurisprudence, statehood is not the same as quote unquote state in the corporate sense of Delaware, New Jersey, or California. It refers to the political condition of a people who have reclaimed their national identity, law, and government under their own divine and national principles, right? Statehood being the organized expression of a nation's sovereignty, its ability to govern itself, set its own laws, and engage with other states as a recognized body politic. You agree?
Now, yeah.
Well, let me keep on. A state is a nation with structure, defined people, land, law, and governance. The Moorish Americans, under the principles laid out by Prophet Noble Drew Ali, constitute a nation state, not a religious group, within the family of nations. The Prophet declared Moorish Americans to be a quote unquote clean and pure nation descended from the ancient Moabites, thus reestablishing national consciousness after centuries of denationalization. So to be a Moorish American is to belong to a reawakened state, not a colony, corporation, or franchise of the United States. It means aligning with the Moorish National Republic or its lawfully chartered arms, such as USA or others, rather than the corporate U.S. system that governs under colorable jurisdiction. Because we're talking about reclaiming. Let me just finish. So the legal foundation of Moorish statehood, true statehood, requires 4 fundamental elements. You can tell me whether you agree or not. Recognized in international law as the Montevideo Convention, 1933.
Yes.
Okay. A permanent population.
Yes.
The Moorish American people, descendants of the ancient Moabites, who constitute a national body. 2, a defined territory, ancestral lands in the Americas, specifically Northwest Amexem, North America, before the colonial imposition of state lines. 3, a government, the Moorish divine and national movement, guided by the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And 4, the capacity to enter relations with other states through lawful notice, declaration, and treaty-based engagement rather than corporate contracts.
Exactly.
Thus, the Moorish statehood asserts jurisdictional sovereignty, the right to self-identity, self-govern, correct status within divine and natural law rather than under statutory or corporate codes. All right. And then it gives the spiritual and metaphysical dimension from my glitch perspective, right? A state begins as a mental vibration, a recognition that we are the living government.
Yes.
Right. The fall of Moorish dominion occurred first through mental colonization, and the restoration must likewise begin through mental emancipation.
Yes.
And when one declares Moorish nationality, one is not simply filling out papers, one is reclaiming dominion over thought, word, and territory, realigning with the natural order of divine mind.
Yes.
And so, in the sense, statehood is the outer reflection of inner sovereignty.
Yes.
A nation of awakened minds automatically forms a lawful state because thought is the highest law. Now, the summary definition, statehood, or the Moorish American definition, the collective and conscious reestablishment of the Moorish nation's divine and national authority, spirituality, legally and politically, restoring rightful jurisdiction over self, land, and law in harmony with the ancient covenant of the Moabite bloodline and the principles of natural and divine law.
Yes.
I just wanted to bring us back because I want to make sure we cover what we said. This was
we're making a political. See, basically, what we're doing, we're making the cognates, because it has to be cognate. See, because the state of a political existence starts with the mind and your allegiance. Then you have an understanding here, right, on the authority. And also when you go into Herd's law and vestrymen, you'll recognize it's a political operation, actual, in the record.
okay.
You know what I mean? And this is why, like you'll see even people that use what they call tax exclusion. That's why even them, they'll use the what? 1099, that same number.
Mhm.
You know, so the things were already done. The deal of it, this is where you have interesting operations. Then when you go into the records and you see infiltration, COINTELPRO operations, etc. Calvin Coolidge saying to Drew Ali, says, you know, you get 500 to follow you, I'll back you with my Army and Navy. Then it was thousands, and then they reneged, and then he went bankrupt. And then that's when they did the bank, you know, later they did the birthright crap. Mm-hmm. And this also from Sister Zodiacus's Celestial Scribe, Origin of the Prophet. And this is from scribed by Zodiacus Eel, our good friend, you know, who's communicating with the ancestors now. Time never was when man was not. A nation by law must possess historical continuity, and due to the reconstruction of history, we have been separated from our names, our nationality, our lands, our language, and birthrights. It is beyond time that we correct these fallacies that have caused mental and spiritual rigor mortis because we are dead in the eyes of the law. We must not forget the great stride that was made by Noble Drew Ali in 1925 when he asked for and received lawful acknowledgement from Herbert Hoover, who was acting president at that time, CEO, to awaken us from a constitutional coma and restore our nation as a part of history unknown to the branded Moors inhabiting this distinct portion of the earth. Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great treatise, Minerva Mundi, contains poetical and profound allegories, dogmas of self-creation of beings, the law of creation that results from two forces which are known for the profane chemist as apothecary and pharmacy, and revealed to the initiate as alchemy. In the first operation, which is wholly internal, it is free over our souls. No, it is to free our souls from all prejudices and all vices. It is the philosophical salt, wisdom, quote unquote, mercury, personal attitude and labor, quote unquote, and sulfur, vital energy, and the ardor of the will. The origin of the prophet, part 1, has been scribed to awaken those who are seeking to remove the residual waste left behind by religious indoctrination and illuminate others to the true emphasis, significance of the fragmented allegories, parables, hyperboles, and fables that have been used to conceal the truth of the cosmological significance of the scriptures. It needs to be known that the Hermes or the Heliobibliothek, which is known as the Holy Bible to the people, is the book of the sun, which has been reconstructed and diluted to evoke negative energies to keep the masses in a spiritual coma. Some within the nation will offer their opinions and thoughts of the deciphering of the chapters and verses as a negative form of study, and with split tongues use the scriptures to emphasize some point they are trying to propagate. It needs to be known that the reconstructed and diluted versions of the scriptures are only a catalog of cosmological recordings symbolized by way of various processions of the energy to endow, to educate us on the workings of the universe and not neglect the fact that the law is created above and then radiates below. The modern devices of a republic are rather dogmatic because of its concept of liberty, equity, equality, and fraternity, which excludes any notion of right to pursue happiness. Liberty is a single principle that has been diluted to self-determination, and its origin was sovereignty of oneself over one's self. Government is constitutional and not anarchy, and composed of a quaternary form of law and and order, discipline, and subordination to a degree. Those who study are cognizant of the formation of government and of masonry, and many of us will speak of the great meetings that took place in the longhouses, which are lodges, those are longhouses, and how our ancestors revealed the mechanics of nature in the forms of symbols, and many do not themselves know of the workings of nature, and most often have not the knowledge to interpret the symbols. And despotism is the devouring lion that roars at the night and drowns the sounds of nature and speech, tongues immobilized, birthrights stolen, and ignorance reigns across the land, only leaving the cries of the enslaved. The mighty king lion rules, and its tribes, and the name of Judah is separated from the 12 nations, and its metallic modern devices of a republic are rather dogmatic because of its concepts, etc. And so it emerges of Regulus of the symbol symbolized in the gold of 1933. As one can see, despotism and superstition are those, excuse me, I was trying to read this, those and the modern devices of republic are rather dogmatic. Now, so government is constitutional and not anarchy, and is composed of a quaternary form of law and order, discipline, and subordination to a degree. So the sacred body of nature has been covered with veils of allegory, of enigmas, of parables, of legends, and of myths, and all intended to conceal the truth from the profane minds. The widow of Phoenicia has been called by many names: Zodiacus, Grand Architect, Cosmic Matter, Cosmic Mother, Mother Nature, Binah, Blazing Star, Beth, yet none will ever measure her greatness. Therefore, it would be profane to define her existence, and we must all learn that she rests within the womb of all that we suckle from her breast. Cosmic nourishment to feed our souls, many from antiquity to present, suffered and perished to learn of her mystery, not knowing that she only reveals herself to the worthy, and those who have that love her is spent or spirit and in truth, and she abandons those of careless minds and of cold heart to error in their ignorance. And the marvels of the cosmic mother continues to be interpreted through the symbols of all kinds of letters and members, compounded only enlighten us to the spirit yet does not teach us her origin. Words are creations of men, defined by man, and in reality having no power. The living obeys the rules and laws of the dead, never receiving any freedom or liberty. Our pursuits are in vain, and happiness is unforgiving. When we succeed in the lessons, it gives us the ability to change into spiritual gold such things even as of least value, and even the foul things of the earth. The alchemist refers to those two great forces as fixed and volatile, symbolizing the absolute necessity and liberty. Zodiacus is more, but I figured that suffice from a metaphysical and from an adeptus position, because apparently, she had an adeptus mind, so we always talk from that level. And of course, this is what I just read is from Zodiacus's celestial scribe, origin of the prophet. Septenary crown, for those who don't know, So again, Zodiacus, I know Zodiacus, and this is just some of her writings. So I wanted, like I told you, for the statehood, that's part of the knowledge, because it's sort of like people, and of course we know some of the rules in the different degrees of masonry where certain things are kept from what they call the profane, because they would abuse it or not appreciate it. And that if their spirit was right, it would come to them, But basically, what I just read is from Zodiacus's writings.
She was an amazing teacher, and she actually, I know she had a mission, and putting us together was one of her last missions, I think, because she actually, was instrumental. Absolutely, asking me, let's drive to Philly and here.
And one of the things that I wanted to share with you, even in our conversation when we were talking earlier, a lot of people who don't have an adult background are attempting to arrive to this state of mind thinking it's not already done, when the information, the people who already know this stuff, right? And that's just piece of it, and people in adult degrees already have this information. And my position has always been watching people always trying to come together and trying to recreate what was already done, and they're not qualified. Not that their intent is not good, if you get the point, but that this stuff should have been exposed, and they should be building on it, meaning that they shouldn't be spending years and years trying to figure things out, suffering, you know what I mean? And then, mixing emotional thoughts with actual cultural facts that have what you call maxims of law, because maxims of law, those things which are established and are unchanged. And what you find is people in government, people in scholarship, people in secret societies already know this, and watch people spend years going around in circles, starting organizations, trying to reinvent the wheels when the wheels was always there, sort of like what Drali talked about in the Quran, where the people are walking on jewels that are right beneath their feet.
Acres of diamonds. It's like acres of diamonds. Yeah, but there are people who are actually doing, and
and you appreciate, and that's why you appreciate people who are really working to get things done.
Right, and I do. What my concern is, all of the fractured body parts, I call them, the disjointed.
Why they're fractured.
Disconnected, rather, not even fractured. They're disconnected.
Why they are.
Well, there's a lot of reasons. There are many reasons.
Yes.
There are people who mean well and are doing, things, but they're working, on an island in a silo by themselves, and you got to connect.
Not just that, but it's back to understanding that a lot of the schisms that we look at is often blamed on people's intransigence themselves, when actually a war operations is operating on them from birth. to create this situation, which is really what's not looked at. And this is back to like the average person, you know, like our people grow up and they're struggling and trying to fix things and don't even know that the 501c3 was a war operation, but yet we look at it as something, you know, so some what you would call benefit of, as they would say, teaching the word type thing. And you take, you know, because you take things for honor, you know, you just like people when they're grown, they don't be thinking in their mind with some kind of cold heart that someone's deliberate deceiving them.
No, but they, yeah, but
you know what I mean?
mhm.
And then the other point of it is most people not understanding, you know, the de facto nature of the Whiggamore Party, right? I have no idea that, you know, the Board of Education was set up by the War Department.
Mhm.
Then they're thinking that education is for their benefit to participate in society, even though ultimately it never seems to work for them in their favor, and they end up being in debt. And without, you know, with your compensation to, how do you say, to pay for the so-called education that they spent years getting and discovering that it don't work for them. And then the race argument comes in, or the redlining comes in, and everything, not knowing that we are subject to war operations.
Absolutely.
And then we'd be looking at each other. How come we don't, you know, how come we don't gel? How come people come together with all this goodwill and they can't seem to make sense? And they're always clashing, not knowing that they're targeted under war operations, and they're thinking that their education that they got is sufficing to solve problems when it's actually animal husbandry.
You know, I saw a quote, a post on Facebook, and I won't name the individual who picked, but they're a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And it said many stories of sickness, disease, blood clots, underlying conditions worsening, and so many deaths. The V. And I thought when I saw that, they spelled it out. But I said, you know, in my response, you know, my comment, I said, you know, the absolute truth. We tried warning our people for months not to take it. Unfortunately, we have been tricked and conditioned to trust those, quote unquote, who have finally exposed themselves as untrustable and diabolical. They say the fallout from it can begin to appear up to 5 months afterwards. And we did that. But to see finally one of the ones who stood up in pulpits and convinced people, because they were told, you know, that was the thing to do, and now having a revelation, oh my,
mm-hmm.
is that why we're seeing all this? Absolutely.
And then look at this.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, it's the mind. You got to have your own mind. You have to have sovereignty of mind to be able to make sure that you keep yourself safe while you're, you know, getting your state of mind is just, as I said,
because even when you're dealing with what we call the civil state or the political state, right? One of the major attributes of being competent to operate is called a pledge. Then they give you the rules, or what you call the law, to study. Then they give you a civic test. Then you're allowed what they would call just soleil, and they give you a card. Isn't it interesting that people who visit here go through that test, and yet people who are here don't even know the test?
Yeah.
Yet we're always, you know, just like the discussion we have, like people, you know, many people that we've traveled or that we've dealt with over the years, many people we know about, many people who know people that we know about, that start organizations. We need to get together and get our people together and get some unity. And they're talking, not even knowing that our disunity its origin was not a natural form of ignorance, but actually come from the War Department, this BIA, War Department. General Education Board, 1902. They murdered Winona in Philadelphia, and they even have a statue of Tammany right at the base of Market Street. Before you go on what, 76. And people from around the world take pictures of Tammany with a kilo on the shoulder. They march, even when they had to march, right at the art museum, Egyptian architecture. And they have the statue right there called Eakins Oval. And even though they Europeanized the statue, Winona, and then they also have the guy with the sword underneath, you know, got a flag, then he got a sword underneath his arm, which means, you know, because they're representing the assassination there. And people come, you know, from, you know, in what they call the tradition in Philadelphia, they go and see the sights and everything. And they even go up there on Lincoln Parkway, and they be taking pictures of what they call Lover's Leap. And that's where they threw Winona off of there. That was 1902. And then they set up the General Education Board. And John D. Rockefeller, your banking systems, etc. Frederick T. Gates, same Gates family that it can be proven that got a patent on the V, COVID stuff, and other biological stuff. And it is demonstrated right here in Executive Order 1190, the biological warfare. It's documented. And it's what even the mathematical equations, study of the human as a biological machine. And all politicians know this, and many of our people know this, but what you discover, Dr. G, they don't look at this stuff from a geopolitical perspective. They always run to the race argument, talking about they don't like our skin, and not on this is war. They've been waging war on us for generations, and most of these people, and then half of them having meetings because they got degrees and in debt, and then trying to get a job to pay the debt and can't afford the debt and their house and their mortgage and all this stuff. They're always picking one in between, spend a whole life doing that. And they go right to the patent office and start seeing the patents to the same Gates family that set up under the War Department with Rockefeller, 1902, after they murdered Winona, known as the General Education Board. And even in, which we talked about over and over again, the philosophy page, they even tell you what they're going to do negatively to your children. They're going to teach them to do perfectly imperfect things that their parents have already been trained to do. That's Gates, Frederick T. Gates. Do the research on this biological stuff that people are suffering from right now, right? Gates. Same patent. And people, which means stuff that's documented, and people won't even make the correlation. This is, again, why a lot of times you'll see me redundantly repeat these things. This is why, like, over the years, sometimes when we talk, and I know, because it's even in your mental, you know, like you be thinking, yeah, you got to be redundant. You got to be, because they put things out there for our people to be distracted with, and this is where your problem is. It's sort of like they'll keep throwing stuff out there and get us arguing a whole bunch of other stuff, and they're focused on this. This is the operation. They stay focused on this operation and keep us arguing other stuff. And who's this against? Minorities, blacks, Indians, Latinos, Puerto Ricans, and poor whites in their rise from up under the depression and powers that be, i.e. the government, code, King Alfred. Then you do research on King Alfred and you see the battles of the Moors. I mean, everything, because it's like, once you start doing research, it's like, it's not even a can of worms. It's a can of snakes, worms, and rabbits, and frogs. And the point that I'm making also, Dr. J, is you can see sometimes why I get irritated when people who I know are readers and scholars, or people who belong to any of the secret societies with any degrees, pretend that they don't put these things together when these things are available, and you run into them if you're doing research. It's not like, you know, like some of the stuff, it's not like you're like necessarily focused and deliberately looking for a specific thing. Is once you start going into that rabbit hole of the geopolitics, this stuff pops up all over the place. Not unlike, like say for instance, if someone's looking at when they start talking about the status of our people, right? And the state of affairs and the citizenship status, which is used not just here in North America under the United States, but actually used by other countries as a point of law reference. And they call it the Dred Scott case as a study case on citizenship and rights and state status, and is used as a pattern. And at the same time, so now you got the Dred Scott case, 1857, right? And then when you do the Dred Scott case, it leads you to the William Dungy case that took place just before then. And before Lincoln was president, you discovered him being a member of the bar, he actually fought the case. And what was the case? That this so-called Black Bill is not Black Bill, he's a Moor. That was the nature of the case. One of the most important cases in history on legal state status and citizenship. And one of the least taught, yet one of the most powerful and commonly known by all social scholars on statehood, on citizenship, and on rights is the William Dungy case. And they'll always reference to the Dred Scott case, even though it's sensitive. Why? Because it doesn't identify. It'll just say that the claimant was in error. Of course he was in error, because he ain't Black, he ain't Negro Indian. He's a Moor. So all they needed to do was make the connection to the Dungy case that superseded it. But they suppressed the. That's why when you talk about statehood and status of people, the people here, Indian, Black, them people right there. It's all documented. They're the same people. And what do you got here? Schism, 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 schism. And all these people, same bloodline. And then when you talk to them, that would these are, from my personal experience, but I'm just saying, like, if you're talking to someone from a real research position, because, these people used to come to my classes in New York and also from other islands, right? And they, in islands, they call themselves Moros, right? And More, right? Even have European comes from France, right? They just live in New York with his family. Used to come to our classes in Harlem, right? And they said, well, we got More in our family. Half our family is Moors. Everybody knows this. Why did y'all seem to have a hard time trying to tell these people? Everybody knows that. I mean, this is the Renaissance, and that's what brought Europe out. The Renaissance. Everybody knows that. Why don't y'all teach that? So we tell these people, they think it's the Moorish club. They think it's some kind of religion. And the rest of the world knows, and when you have the not unlike some of our mail comes in, right? We get mail from all over the world, right? Like we have boxes of letters, from the Moroccan Star, and some of them we used to publish in the paper, right? From all over the world, from Egypt, just like right now, we're even at the house. We get mail from England, from Egypt, people, they're around the world. And I think, I understand it politically, but a lot of times it's kind of disappointing when you see how hard it is to get it across to our people that their statehood is their state of mind. The state already exists. They're just mentally outside of it. And are held in wardship, because even in law, when you look into the status, right, the people are held in what's called wardship tenures, right, and then they're classified under wardship tenures as minority.
Well, we don't know that at a certain age we are supposed to relinquish that minority status by,
Hold on. Now, then when you go into the records for dissolution, of colonial operations, rights of indigenous people, they were supposed to tell these people.
They didn't.
See, it ain't like, it's almost like miseducating the people, then charging them with the miseducation, and then saying they have an obligation to correct a misrepresented document that they created that is not theirs. that belongs to the routing system of the Internal Revenue. It has nothing to do with you whatsoever, right?
Mhm.
And they also don't tell the people, this is the other part, right? That to have right of claim, even if you get the instrument, if it's not the original with the allonges attached to it, that's the trade numbers, because remember, it's used all around the world. And it is literally a book that has entries, and they're called allonges, that attach to that entity, and it's not yours, it's theirs, right? And then they told the people that if you go get a copy of this and claim your, and as soon as you say your possessive, you relinquish right of claim, you're now incompetent, because it's not yours. You didn't create it, your mom didn't create it, it's misrepresented, it's dead. And to send you through a mirage of things that have to come to them with a contract of sale of human trafficking that they created to convince you to claim possessive position, therefore you have the authority, the obligation to undo the corruption that they did and not tell you the truth that in law, this is in law, the right of claim to the instrumentality of the routing instrument, right, must be the original, not a copy, with the allonges. They won't tell you that. That's why like 21 years ago when I did that class in Connecticut, when a lot of people were becoming conscious, and it was a couple of radio shows. I think the Phil Marsh show, or they flew me up to Detroit to do the Phil Marsh show. So I did Phil Marsh because there was a lot of people up there that was going through the process with the birth certificate. And then there was also a woman, a European woman. Her name was, I think, Trochet. I remember that name, Trochet. She perfected everything, with the so-called process. Claiming the birth certificate and all that other stuff. And when she went to make her claim, they tried to disappear, but there was a lot of people that was following it, and that's why she didn't disappear. But the claim was not satisfied. But she spent years, like a lot of people, and this is why I wrote that article, even about the fraud of the UCCs, because I knew this rule in contract law. I knew it by law anyway, that you must have the allonges and the original to make the claim. But I recognized that they were sending these people on, knowing these people, finding out, they're catching on, so let's throw them something to keep them busy for a few years. This is why you'll see now, and I always say this, Dr. J, and consider this too, even in your thoughts and your communications. Name the people that you know that got a hold of that bottomless pit account and have been using it. And yet,
I hear people telling me, but I'm not going to name them because I haven't seen the proof. I don't know.
Yeah, but
I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying.
I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen.
I've had folks tell me that they are. So
what does that mean for the masses?
I have no idea. I'm just saying.
No, I just
figured they let somebody through as a distraction.
Exactly. The same way they used to kill the cases when we used to go to court. On the traffic tickets, bundles of tickets, and they kill them, and then when you go out, it ain't in the record. The same way when I built that community center, when they did all thousands of notes, fines, but the whole deal.
Well, listen, there's another stuff. That's for another day.
Yeah.
Listen, I do have an announcement before y'all go, and that is that we have our last absolute. Let me pull this up. We have our last. Here we go. We do our fourth Friday venue, and this is the last session of 2025, which is going to be on next Friday, the 24th. If you want to hear teaching Lady J, Grand Sheik, and see me, we will be at House of Reawakening Mind live and living, not color, but there in person, not in person. We'll be there in the flesh as living sentient beings. Look at me, I think all the words that I got on next Friday, but it's the last one of 2025, y'all. We're not going to do anything until February. That's when our when our beloved Grand Sheik will have his 80th. So I'm putting it out there. Yeah, so it's going to be on a Saturday, February 14th, that day. And there's something on our website. There's a save the date on our website, and we're looking forward to the new website. The new website. We got a new website, but the new one is going to be coming out coming out very, very soon. And we want you to visit it, and we'll be putting, it'll be some great stuff on there. We are grateful to each and every one of you for being here with us tonight, and as always, also running under there, you see, if you want to be a part of the next meeting that I do online, that's not on YouTube. But you have to, this time the text is so I can separate it from the folks that say count me in. This one will say civics class, and we'll send you a link when that meeting is coming up if you are interested in being part of that. But it will not be on YouTube or Facebook. So with that, closing words from our Grand Sheik.
So now look at the irritation that's going on around the world.
I don't know.
Now, when we say irritation nations, the clash of nations.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And remember, over these last 20 some odd years, when we put papers out there, we're giving them an opportunity to redeem themselves by acting right. They choose not to. Now, just one more thing. Here's This is the Pope when he came to New York, right? The Empire State. So that's the land of Nod. That's where we used to meet with the Order of the Great Seal. And sat under the Moor's head, while those who are direct descendants of Moors debate as to the impacting validity of the honor of their ancestors. And who are they, the Moors? That's the real king. And there's Khalifa's bear. There you go, y'all.
Lift it up higher. Yeah, down. Yeah, so you can see. What? Pope's in the middle. You can barely see him, but he's the one.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
Sitting right again.
So I'm just showing you.
They know. They know.
Not just that things are public, but if you don't know, you see. They have eyes and don't see. But it's not like they're confident that our emotional approach to things blinds us. So again, there's your Moor's head. There's Khalifa's bear. Right? There's Pope Rome, so he claiming to be God. But that's who. And they got the keys. What is gold and silver? Keys to the treasuries of the world under the Moor's head.
I'm still that way.
But now you understand why they claim to be Jews and are not Jews?
Yeah.
All right. Because it ain't their stuff.
Yeah, that is so true. All right then. Look, y'all, we love you. Hey, get your flash drive if you have it. Get your gold and silver because it's going up.
Well, do research on the price of gold. There, look, I got a report. We got a report last night, right? In China and in certain Eastern countries, people on the streets right now are buying ounce of silver for 180 US notes.
Really?
So what does that really tell you that's going on that they're hiding from the people here?
They're keeping that price down so they can get it all.
What did I tell you years ago? I say, get as much as you can.
Yeah.
Even right now with it jacked up, people would be ahead of the game. But guess what? The places, the COMEX and stuff is so-called running out.
Yeah. Well,
Who do you think getting it?
The banks are buying it up.
And you daggone right.
The banks are buying it up. So you know, if you wanna get your silver, here we go. I'll run that there. You certainly can get some silver.
Can people still order through you, Dr. J?
Yeah, there's my link. It's running at the bottom. But like I said, I was getting it back when you could get it for like $22, 22 notes. Now it's like 15.
Do the research. They're selling it. They're selling it on people are selling it on the street now in China and other places. 180 US.
Yeah, I'm not selling it.
No, they're buying. They're trying to get it.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to get it because they know what's coming.
Yep. So get your silver, get your gold. Silver is more reasonable. As I think I have one gold coin, about $1,900. Now there's like 4,000 almost for the same coin.
That's called like your backup.
Yeah, but silver, I'm good. I'm good with silver, y'all. He's putting stuff in my hand. All right, y'all, we going. We're going. Yeah, we're going. So.
Thank you all for being here tonight, and you're looking radiant, Dr. G.
Keep on talking.
You know what I mean?
Y'all.
Looks like Dr. Tia's sister. When she wear hair like that, you'll be looking like sisters.
Deeper and deeper I go. I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the
This is not merely a building. It's a sanctuary of remembrance, a threshold where the veil parts, and minds once lulled to sleep begin to rise. This is the house of reawakening minds.
I entered in silence, intellect and despair, seeking refuge from illusions thick in the air. Walls lined with scrolls, lectures dense with light, where knowledge resurrects what was hidden from sight. No pulpit performance, no charismatic show, just a word in its purity, allowing the soul to grow. History unpacked with surgical precision, exposing falsehood, restoring vision. They taught me jurisdiction, the power of a name, how to stand in one's truth, free from legal games, from colonial codes to Moorish descent. I learned that ignorance is the true imprisonment. Not just the church, this is consciousness refined. I found myself inside the house of.
This is sacred ground, not just wood and stone. A haven for the seekers who once felt alone. Here the veil is lifted, the contract unwinds. In the house of reawakening minds. Truth is the altar, wisdom is the flame. Every soul remembered, every bloodline reclaimed. Time collapses and the spirit aligns. Inside the house of reawakening
We
light.
speak of capitives, diminution, and trust law with grace. Pulling veils from the statutes that distort the race. Reverend Doctor don't preach, she teaches through metaphysical keys and universal speeches. From Egypt to Amexim, maps are redrawn, and the minds of the lost are profoundly reborn. They decode etymology, undo the brands, expose how black was a corporate sleight of hand. This is reclamation through language and tone, when status is corrected and sovereigns are grown. From natural law to the astrological signs, the cosmos converge in these sacred confines. This ain't dogma, it's the science of the divine. Every lecture a seed in the garden of the mind.
You said know thyself but gave no guide, until I found the house where illusions died. Here the soul remembers, the contract is clear. We are the heirs and the ancestors cheer. This is sacred ground, not just wood and stone. A haven for the seekers who once felt alone. Here the veil is lifted, the contract unwinds. In the house of reawakening minds. Truth is the altar, wisdom is the flame. Every soul remembered, every bloodline reclaimed. Time collapses and the spirit aligns. Inside the house of reawakening.
They don't ask